I understand that you've already been introduced to Clare, Bridget, and Jude. So perhaps we could just have a little bit of an intro from Arne, Carolyn, and Marta, possibly starting with you, Arne, and then we'll go through just very briefly, say a little bit about yourself and your background, your interest in BFRBs.
Sure. So I'm a wet lab scientist. I'm a biochemist, molecular biologist by training, and I currently work actually trying to identify novel therapeutic targets for psychiatric disorders. My interest actually in the BFRB was that when I'd actually heard Claire speak. I suppose that sort of opened the gate, like with a lot of people, because I have trichotillomania. So, and it's sort of because it's more personal. I can, as I said, I can be my own guinea pig. So it gives me a bit more perspective, I think, on the sort of condition. So it's a bit selfish in that respect, but it's something I can relate to.
Hi, I'm Caroline Harbison. I guess I have multiple functions here today. So for one, I'm the treasurer of BFRB UK in Ireland. As you can hear from my accent, this is where the and Ireland came from, on my insistence. I have hair pulling disorder myself, and I have my entire life. On top of that, I am also doing my PhD currently at the University of Amsterdam, and it's focusing on decision making and habitual behavior. So you can see where the interest came there. But previous to my PhD, I actually worked for Oxford as a research assistant in decision making under Matthew Rushworth, who you heard earlier today. And I think it was around a year ago, I was scrolling through our Twitter and came across the Trick Prof on Twitter. And saw that the Trick Prof was indeed Claire beside me, and that she worked in Oxford. So I very scaredly sent her an email and said, hi, Claire, my name is Caroline. I am a research assistant and I pull my hair out and I work for this organization. Would you like to go for a coffee? And that coffee is where the idea for this conference came from. So that is a little bit about me. Yeah.
And Marta?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Marta. I've been picking at my skin for most of my life. During the puberty, it was kind of normal. It felt everybody had some acne and skin problem. However, as you enter your late 20s, others are having better skin and I didn't. That's when I realized there's kind of a problem, possibly. And that coincided with me doing my undergraduate psychology degree. I've done a study looking at the relationship between skin picking, attachment, and emotional regulation. Then I went on to do my master's in research, where I've conducted a qualitative study interviewing people living in Scotland who identify as having skin picking. I've also met Bridget quite a few years ago, as well as Jude, so I'm on Team Scotland. And that's where my journey started. I also work clinically as an assistant psychologist in addictions, which is a specialist clinic. We don't work with BFRBs as such. However, when we do come across, we try to address it the best we can.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's your panel this evening. I do think just on this point, and clearly, you know, what we've got here, we're blessed with a panel that has both research expertise and interest, and also personal experience of the target behaviors. And that's always been, I remember when Claire, who gets quite excited about many things, but I've rarely seen her quite as excited, as enthusiastic when she burst in to see me talking about her desire to really move into this field and try and shift the dial from a UK perspective. Although, as John and Suzanne, I think, demonstrated, there's a huge amount of really excellent work been done. It's really the idea of building on that. But I do think that is a really potent combination. It's something that Sir Richard Doll, who many people will know, a really famous epidemiologist, was the Regius Professor of Medicine here, did a lot of work linking lung cancer with smoking, and built a team including Sir Richard Peto and Sir Rory Collins and lots of other knights. really, but back in sort of the late 1990s, when I was talking to them about doing trials in bipolar disorder, I thought it was hugely important if you could involve people who actually had a lived experience of that disorder in the nature of the trials. It's been hugely important hugely important in his work as well. So I do think it's a really important combination. And that's why I think getting a little bit, because it's been a really busy day and we've covered a huge amounts of area and we've seen this complexity, so these glimmers of insight into these behaviors, but the heterogeneity, the huge amount of, where the boundaries are, the nature of the continuum, the comorbidities, etc. So there's an awful lot of work to be done. But I thought it might be good to get the reflection of this panel on what they're going to take away from the day. Maybe just 1 or 2 points each. What are the most important things that have struck you from the day as we've heard? And Claire, I'm going to come to you first, please.
I guess I had something of a head start, given that I was heavily involved in putting together today and including having conversations with many of the speakers ahead of time. So my reflection is that we've covered a huge amount of ground and that there's, in terms of really understanding the mechanism of this set of behaviours, I think we've got some really exciting places to start from. But I guess one thing that was a highlight for me was actually the talk by Mallory. Mallory'd flown all the way from the States to give her very first presentation, and she challenged us to define stigma. And I'm still chewing that over. So I think the definition of stigma is an interesting one. But I guess the second thing that I'm really left with, and particularly after hearing John and Suzanne, is scale. If we're gonna understand this set of disorders, we need to really scale up, because the heterogeneity otherwise just blows us out the water. And so I think we need to be thinking bigger.
Thank you. Maybe just take it along.
Yeah, so Claire texted me around an hour ago and said, this is what to think about. And I said, oh, okay, very scary. And I had to think, and I think for me, the biggest takeaway was everyone in this room who has any sort of BFRB has heard the phrase, it's just a bad habit, get over it. And I think what we've really learned here today is it's not just a bad habit. It's not. We have things about grooming and socialization and sleep and shame and everything. Like, there's absolutely no argument for these behaviors being habits anymore. Even in, say, Kelly's presentation, which really stuck with me earlier, she has data to prove that in the lab, these aren't habits. So that's, yeah, my biggest takeaway today.
Thank you. My biggest takeaway is about masking, because there are 2 things that struck me today which are surprising, apart from all of the other things that everyone's going to mention. Is that, first of all, I've seen people going up to the stall for BFRB UK and Ireland and asking questions that assume we are an enormous organisation with an enormous team and that we all work full-time on this, which is amazing. That's the impression we definitely want to give out, but that's far from the truth. And the other thing is a conversation I had with someone in the corridor who I won't name, and I had a lovely conversation, but they said that the people speaking today are not very severe with their BFRBs. So those are both examples of masking. We've done a fantastic job today of showing, of faking it till we make it, right? Of showing the room that we are holding it together and that we are doing amazing work, and we are. But that doesn't mean that it's not really hard to actually be here, and to, after all these years, to still stand up and talk about it is really hard. And I think that's important to remember.
It's really hard to pick one thing when there's so many interesting things that came throughout the day. For me, it feels almost impossible, so I won't do it. I'll mention a few if that's okay, but very quick. I think the altered state of consciousness is actually fascinating. Professor Dunsbar's view on kind of evolutionary lens to it, normalizing it. I think that's hugely reassuring, and I think what, I haven't heard it the first time, but it always strikes me when you talk, Bridget, about biosolidarity. I think the importance of sense of community, the importance sense of lived experience and what we can do for one another in all of this. That's it.
So this is the first big sort of UK Ireland conference, and I've been to many US conferences, and it's always the same takeaway for me: the parents. I love the conversations I have with the parents. My parents struggled. They didn't know what was wrong with their little girl. And that's not changed even today, although we have names and diagnoses for this. Parents want to understand how they can love and support their child. So to every parent I've spoken to today, I don't underestimate what you've done today by being here. You continue to blow my mind, and I believe you will continue to be my takeaway at the next conference I come to. Thank you for being here.
I'm really sort of struck by the complexity of the whole lot. I think that's the biggest thing, and that it's going to be quite difficult to get to the roots of it. I think that's the point, no pun intended. So, but certainly, I was really sort of thinking about if there's genetic aspects, and I mean, I always come back to my own sort of stuff, I suppose, but and you know, physiological responses and all of these sort of things, and just really how to design these sort of studies and how to get to it. But I mean, it's really an enlightening conference because it does make you appreciate all the things you really have to take into account.
Thanks very much indeed. Brilliant and really concise, but really thoughtful comments from the panel. So thanks for that. And the great thing is that it means that we've got some time for comments and questions from the floor too. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, reflections. We've got an early adopter. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we have an online question here for the panel. So TTM, my count, is a 7-stage sequence. Raise arm to chosen area, search for hair, select hair, examine hair. And to what extent are all these stages being investigated? And do you have any thoughts on the possible causes, evolutionary purpose, benefits of aspects, and of these such as lip rubbing, tooth combing, etc.?
Someone else. I was an external examiner in PPI, you mentioned it earlier, for a clinical psychology doctorate from University of Bath. And the student actually did her literature review. No, she didn't. It was her actual project. My goodness. It was her actual project was on rituals in hair pulling. She got an entire clinical psychology doctorate out of looking at the rituals, the examining the hair, the rubbing it across the lip, etc. So it matters. Someone looked at it. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks for the questioner. I guess I come back to the heterogeneity and Courtney's talk, and I've still got that heat map in my head of the variety of places that people poll, and I'm sure that Courtney also has heat maps for the way people poll, and Courtney's got a lot of heat maps. And so we're dealing with a huge amount of heterogeneity, and so it's interesting that the questioner had a very sort of specific set of actions or thoughts and actions that made up theirs, but that won't be the same for everybody. And so it's really about understanding that heterogeneity. Yeah. Anybody else got any? Yeah.
I think as well, one thing we can really look to, coming from Robin's talk earlier, is the evolution of these behaviours. I mean, when you go to the zoo and look at monkeys grooming each other, they might pick a parasite or a bug off each other, look at it, eat it in their mouths. And I'm sure, obviously, I'm not an evolutionary scientist or I don't work with monkeys, but I'm sure if we looked at other species, looked at their grooming behaviours, that we'd see a lot of those patterns happening. And that these things, again, are just very natural in the natural world, and these have somehow become disordered in humans.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? We've got a question here.
Okay, so thank you for setting up the conference and everything. It's been very helpful. So my question was about habit awareness training, and I was wondering what you think of the effectiveness of habit awareness training and the role of technology in it. Because I know we have things like Habit Aware, for example, earlier today. And also myself, I'm looking into developing software for habit awareness training using AI and webcams and things. So I'd be really interested to know what your opinion is on how effective it is, yeah, habit awareness training, and also the role of technology.
I'll start and then I'll pass. I think one thing that what we've talked about today is just the individuality of these disorders. But when it comes to treating these disorders, habit awareness training, no doubt about it, is definitely going to help. I mean, Anila's done loads of studies now looking at how her bracelet helps people, about how when you interrupt that movement, that motion, that you can then stop the behavior from happening. But it is just a tool in a big toolbox. We need to address other things, like, for example, acceptance and commitment therapy. You can add that into your toolbox. That can really help with the feelings of shame and anxiety that come with these things. Then, as much as CBT may not be the best thing for BFRBs, but you can take bits from it, add that to your toolbox, add bits from dialectic behavioral therapy, bring that into a toolbox, even things from, say, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step programs, things can be taken from that and added in. I think it's really just dependent on the person. Yeah.
So I love pulling out my hair. Is there anyone else here that just really enjoys it? And it feels great. So my darling Anila, I think it's wonderful, but it wasn't for me, because even when it was buzzing, I was like, but I'm really, oh, this just feels so good. So I sent mine to a little girl in the US, and she's grown a lot of her hair back. Isn't that amazing? It works for some people more than others, and I just enjoy pulling my hair too much.
I just wondered, as well as the panel, where we've got Polly, Suzanne, maybe others with expertise in this area that want to speak to this question, not necessarily. That's okay. In that case, we've got another question. So, thank you.
To speak to that one, but I have a question, a different one. Oh, okay, fine. The use of mobile phones has been implicated in behaviors, particularly for young kids and adolescents. Do you see any relationship between BFRB and the use of mobile or electronic gadgets, let me say?
Do you mean, is there a link between kind of scrolling behavior and BFRBs, or were you asking about whether mobiles can be used as a tool, like the other tech we were talking about to help? Which did you mean? I'll go for the first one, which is that I think it's not. I think that I don't know whether Vlad is still here, but that altered state of consciousness thing, that scrolling that we do, that's just it's another way to get your kicks, or another way to just slightly zone out from the world, dissociate, and give your brain a rest. So I think there might be a similarity in that there's that kind of halfway. I like the idea of that we're never quite awake or asleep, we're always somewhere in between, and it just pushes us slightly more into the asleep category. And yeah, so I think we all do lots of things in order to do that, and that kind of scrolling on phones is an example of that.
I'm also thinking in terms of the content, what we actually do when we are on our mobile phones and the things we are exposed to, especially young people. There's so many things that will influence perceptions around physical appearance, what's desirable, what's beautiful, how should we be. And I think the increase in mobile phone use and social media, it's saturating us with that, whether we want it or not, it's bound to have an impact.
And we've got a question at the back up there, please, and then down here. and then Beata.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of each and every one of you. It takes incredible strength to wake up every day, manage and deal with these disorders, research them, talk about them, lecture on them, run a conference, run support groups, be there for people, raise awareness, and just thank you. I'm really proud of you. And everyone that spoke today that has experience of BFRBs. Bridget, you were talking about masking. And I think we all do it, but honestly, you guys have been amazing. I did have one question, which is more sort of an inspirational question, really. When you are researching and doing the work that you do, what keeps you motivated and what's your drive to carry on? Because it's obviously really, really hard. So yeah, what are your motivations? What are your drives? What gets you through, and how do you cope? Thank you.
I just thank you, Pavitt, and straight back at you, right? I mean, thank you for starting this with me so long ago, and I'm so glad you're here. First of all, about stigma of doing research on something that you have personal experience with, which we haven't quite addressed yet, but I think all of us have faced that professional stigma in different spaces. I've certainly have it again and again, and people say, well, that's a bit of a weird topic. Why would you pick that? And then you end up actually having to come out and disclose, because that's the weird reason that we chose a weird topic, is because we have the weird problem. So that makes it continuously difficult, because you're facing stigma in a professional setting, and there's some assumptions that having that subjective connection makes you less of a scientist or less of a professional. And the things that keep me going in those moments are the support groups in the community. And if I'm particularly overwhelmed with all of the work that we're doing in various things, when I run a support group for the parents or the under 18s, it fills me back up again. And I just like the under 18 support group that we've just started recently is my favorite thing in the whole month. It's like my highlight to see these young kids coming together and the impact that has. And that reminds me of like, this is why we do what we do, because it's just amazing.
Thanks, Elsa, for that comment, Pavitt. I think that we've talked a lot about shame today, and actually, when you live with a BFR, you know that feeling, and the shame can be quite crippling. I want to say to people that we may never live without our BFRB urges, but we potentially can live without our shame. And when you get past the shame, actually what you're left with is a really interesting problem. So the thing that gets me out of the bed every day at the moment is that this is a really interesting problem. I also think it's a solvable problem, and that actually with all these brilliant minds together and coming together, and as we have done today, we can actually potentially really do something here that makes life a lot better for people with BFRBs. So that's what gets me up in the morning.
I guess mine is a little less on the research and more in the community. We see every time we do any advocacy work, for example, when Clare was on the BBC the other day, we get inundated with emails from people saying, I didn't know this was a thing that could be helped. I didn't know I could get support. So personally, anytime I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all, that's what I think of. I think of the one person who messaged me on Instagram and said, thanks so much for going on BBC or RT XYZ. You've changed my life. And we get that quite frequently. And I think that's really what drives us, really what drives research. Something we're really missing, at least in my opinion, in research is thinking of the people we're researching as human. We think a lot about, I'm researching, for example, I research anorexia, and we don't really consider what do people we're studying, what do they want to be studied? What did they want to be found out? What did they want? Like, we can look at a tiny piece of the brain and say, what's this part of the brain doing? But as we saw earlier, people want us to research ADHD. Yeah. Honestly, and that's why PPI is so important, really, really getting the feedback from the community.
For me personally, similar like to you guys, is just after doing any kind of awareness initiative is having people coming to you and saying, oh my God, I am not alone. I'm not the only person that does it. It actually has a name. Maybe there is some way forward. So I think that's the main thing. Having presented my study some years ago, I always felt a bit like an alien. Often received kind of critical feedback, if not just looks from different professionals. In terms of, oh, that's such a weird thing. It's a bit cringy, a bit unpleasant. So I'm really amazed with event like today and glad to see we're moving forward.
I'll keep it really brief, Abo, and I don't want the darkness I experienced as a child and as a teenager to be experienced by the future if we continue to make noise about this. I hope no one will ever go to some of the places that some of us did.
Here we go, scientists again. It's a puzzle, and it's a personal puzzle. And I think that's my major driving thing for this. I mean, I've got my other research, but this is almost like a hobby because it's personal. Yeah.
Thanks. So that was a great question. Got the whole panel going. So we're kind of coming to the end of time, but I've got a couple of questions. So we may not get to the last one. We'll have a think about the time. So, gentlemen, here, please.
Quick question. What advice would you give for the loved ones of people with BFRBs?
Don't say just stop it.
I was just going to add, just love us. Just love us unconditionally, which many of you, you're doing that already, but despite all of the effects. I was just reminded about feedback forms. Hannah, do we have feedback forms being circulated? Just don't, okay, sorry.
If it's a child, please never punish them. It's not bad behavior. Please never punish them.
One last thing. Sorry. I always say get alongside the problem. Don't see it as a problem. You know, it's not bad behavior in your child. It's a problem that they're experiencing, and by getting alongside them, you can together with your parent and child try and solve it. But as soon as you sort of, as soon as you go into parenting mode of telling them what to do and what not to do, with people with BFRBs just can't respond to that in the way that we would like them to be able to, and so it's a matter of getting alongside.
Not blaming yourselves. Often as a parent, we think we're responsible if our children are not doing as well as we think. So just know it's nothing that you have done.
So I think, Beata, last question probably, because then we probably need to go on to the reception. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. It feels a bit wrong now taking everybody back from this like really lovely emotional and high state to back to science, but we had this mix, all this. So I was thinking about heterogeneity, actually going back to this issue. And this an issue I thought about a lot in the context of other disorders. And I think there is a fine balance between over heterogeneity, like going for like every single step and spending time on them, but they may be actually clustered, and when we think about practical approach and treatments, it may be not worth going into those fine details, even if they are scientifically very interesting and it's interesting to understand. I think, but I think heterogeneity is a big thing, and it's a big thing in depression, where we are looking still for treatments, or chronic fatigue syndrome, that is another, neglected disorder. And I've got a solution for you, Claire, about your, people with comorbidities. You need a huge group of people, some with depression, some with OCD, some with mixed, and then you just detract and compare. And this is impossible, right? You would need thousands. Yeah, I will.
an opportunity, one of the exciting things we have an opportunity to do, and actually kind of really need to do, is get a couple of questions about BFRBs into the huge surveys that are going, that happen at the moment, and we're on it. So hopefully we'll be getting a couple of questions about BFRBs into the next Oxwell survey, which goes to 40,000 school kids around the country. Will have information about all of their other mental health disorders, all sorts of socioeconomic factors, and we'll know whether they pick their skin and pull their hair and whether it bothers them.
Brilliant. Well, we've got, and of course, we've got Ragib, the chief exec of our Future Health, here on Monday. So you can come and get him to stick into that as well. They've already got 1 million people in that. So that's one of our big cohort studies. Look, thanks very much. Clare, Bridget, Jude, Marta, Carolyn, Arne, fantastic panel. Again, just emphasizing the real power. Don't let anyone ever put you off. This idea of being both someone who has personal experience and being a researcher, it is uniquely powerful and really important because of the energy, the commitment, the engagement, and also the additional effort. So it's brilliant in terms of productivity as well. But we're now going to go into the transition, I think, Claire, to the reception.
We are. Is there any other announcements we need to make? I don't think so. Please, 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 if you're only here today, complete the feedback form. It's super important to us. If you're coming tomorrow, you can do it tomorrow. Come and hang out under the dinosaurs and enjoy chatting some more. And thanks so much, everybody, for coming today. As I weeped this morning, it means the world to me that you're all here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks very much.